Okay, everybody, welcome back to another Wednesday Vegas tips and tricks video. Some people at times have accused this channel of being a vlog, but it rarely is, except kind of when I go to Vegas. But today we're going to wander around my neighborhood a little bit, show you around, and talk a little bit at the same time about some of my first trips to Las Vegas. Somewhere there are photos of the first trip, but I don't know where they are. Hopefully I'll find them one day. So we're going to wander around the neighborhood. It's such a great day to do it because it's like 25 degrees outside. But, all right, here we go. I'll get my hat and we'll see you outside. Okay, so this is my apartment complex. I looked it up. It was built back in 1968. They did do a pretty good remodel on the place a couple of years before I moved in. Lawrence tends to be an expensive place to live. A lot of college students, so a lot of daddy's money. So a lot of the more affordable apartment complexes. By the way, as you can see, we had a little dusting of snow. There's supposed to be more tonight. Fortunately, I don't have to go anywhere today or tomorrow. So not a particularly cheap place to live, and most of the places that are less expensive or a little sketchy, particularly if you go off further to the west. A lot of places you probably don't want to wander around late at night, so kind of on the edge of a sketchy neighborhood. But anyway, so taking you along today on a walk that I have made many times. And the walk always reminds me of Vegas because I always took this walk while listening to Vegas-related podcasts, mostly the 500 by Midnight podcast, which many of you will already know is a great favorite of mine, Tim and Michelle. If you're listening, hi. Probably not. So we'll talk a little bit about Vegas on this walk. I'm actually re-recording the beginning of the walk because the tripod was very, very shaky. So hopefully I don't repeat myself in anything I say here. It has been quite an eventful year here at the apartment complex. The building immediately that you see right here, building F, actually was gutted by a fire just about 11 months ago. They pretty much got it put back together again. So I do actually know someone that lived in that building that lost a great deal of, well, most of their stuff. So not a good thing. So yeah, a lot of apartment complexes and duplexes and things out in this direction. But it's fairly close to work, and it works for me. So the walk that I take is about 1.5 miles. It takes about 30 minutes. We'll see if that's what it ends up being on this video. If it does, I might upload it just as a single video for my great fans who actually want to watch it, because I'm not thinking that many other people are going to watch it anyway. So the area immediately to the south, and I'm going to probably mention this again, was probably a pretty cool place to live back in the 70s and 80s. But obviously things have changed over that time period. I've been here in Lawrence almost 40 years, and this is clearly not the hip, cool part of town anymore. So I think the point at which I figured out how to steady the camera properly is up here, just a few more steps. So we'll walk up there, and then we'll splice this together as best we can, and hopefully you'll get some joy out of it. If I haven't mentioned, it's like literally 25 degrees outside, so probably not the best day to go for a walk, but for y'all, I decided to do it anyway. There you go. But a lot of houses that would have been considered very nice back in the 70s. The Lawrence High School is about 1/2 mile north of here, and I suspect a lot of people moved into this area, like I said, back in the 70s. Some of them still hanging on, older folks, and then probably some newer people who moved in over the last 20, 30 years, as some of those folks passed away or moved out. But yeah, actually seems to be a fairly decent minority representation in this part of town. And some of these streets occasionally feature a friendly cat, which I always enjoy encountering. So I don't think we probably not going to encounter one today, but I do love a nice kitty cat. I lost mine over 10 years ago, and obviously could have acquired another one, but particularly with traveling from time to time, you're either abandoning the animal or you are trying to find someone to take care of it. So it's not really fair to the cat. Which you could like rent a cat. That'd be a good program. Rent a cat. But anyway, so this trip isn't just about my neighborhood, but also about Las Vegas. And so I thought I'd talk about my very first trip to Las Vegas and what prompted it. The previous year I had went out to visit some friends I had met online out in California. There is an Amtrak train that actually runs through Lawrence, Kansas, which is where I live, and travels all the way out to Los Angeles. And then there's a train, the Coast Starlight, that goes from LA up to San Francisco. And that was my preferred method of travel. And so I went out to San Francisco for, it was like 4 or 5 days, I guess, because it take basically a day or more to get out there, day and a half to get out there. On the way back, due to just capacity and such, I went back through on the, I can't think of the name of the train, but very famous train that travels cross country, or at least to Chicago. And that train, one of the stops that train makes is Reno, Nevada. So I stopped overnight in Reno, Nevada. First casino hotel I ever stayed at was the Circus in Reno, Nevada. Didn't know any better, it was fine. So the following year I decided that I would go back to Reno for a few days, visit Lake Tahoe, and then continue on to San Francisco for a week. First and only time I've had 2 weeks off from work in a row. So it was kind of an entertaining experience. And then I discovered that a couple of good friends of mine were actually going to be in Las Vegas the weekend before my trip started. So I decided that I would try to sort of tag along, if you will. And so I spent 3 nights in Las Vegas, courtesy of them. I guess I paid them, but the 2 of them being female and the 3 of us not being engaged in some bizarre relationship, I took one bed and they took the other. So anyway, stayed at the Flamingo. It was fine. First night in town, for some reason I decided I needed to rent a car everywhere I went on this trip, so I did do that. And it took I swear it took an hour, but it was probably more like 20-30 minutes to actually get the car from Avis. I had no problem driving over to Flamingo. At that time, nobody had cell phones because this was 1996. So I had to use like the hotel courtesy phone to find them. And yeah, so The first night I spent in Vegas, I spent playing blackjack and roulette until basically sunrise, and then got some food at the time. As those places, there was a coffee shop there in Las Vegas at the Flamingo. I can't remember what I had to eat. Maybe some pancakes or something, but yeah, I pride myself on having stayed up until sunrise on my first trip to Vegas, and we got around pretty well that weekend. Went downtown a couple of times, went out to the Rio, which was kind of a big deal at that time. Definitely a big deal at that time. And, saw a lot of the Strip, not everything. I don't know if I think I probably just mentioned this, but there's a lot of construction going on at the time with Bellagio and New York, and Stratosphere. Everything was kind of under construction. I did at least get a chance once to walk through casinos like the Sands and the Aladdin that were sort of classic Vegas, but were not long for this world. So it was a good trip and a good time, and definitely encouraged me to want to go back, which I decided I would do the following May. Tried to, like I said, it's hard to sort of remember the world we lived in, what is now 25 years ago. But, there was very limited internet. I mean, there was a World Wide Web. You could go on there and, download porn at very, very slowly. But as far as the kinds of things you could do on the internet, they were somewhat limited. One of the old Vegas tips and tricks would have been to somehow find a newsstand and acquire a copy of the Sunday LA Times, because in their travel section they had a couple of pages where there was where it was basically just advertising for Las Vegas, and those ads included a number of normally very good deals on hotel rooms. So I'm pretty sure most of certainly the next two trips were booked partially with the assistance of the Sunday LA Times, because I first stayed at the Plaza. I'd become very infatuated with downtown. I decided downtown was cool. Originally I was like, oh, Reno's much better than Vegas, which of course isn't really true. It's a fine enough place, a decent place to live. There's some good casinos, some good odds, but it's clearly not on the same level. And also at the time I decided that I was a downtown person and wanted to stay downtown. And the Plaza had like a great rate. It was probably $20 or $25 a night. That was before there were resort fees. So in common parlance these days, that would be considered free. So I went back. It was during May. It was pretty warm. And while I, again, pretended that I was just this huge fan of downtown, I ended up going to the Strip pretty much every day. Walked it, took the bus, got a good workout. So I will have to say there were so many sort of meal deals back then that we don't see anymore. And we're looking down to the south for a minute on the old camera. I find this to be one of the most interesting parts of the walk, because there are two churches right across the street from one another that you can see coming up. Certainly the one on the right. And one of them is like an Assemblies of God church. And, they're pretty hardcore, not judging anybody's beliefs, but, they're a little bit extreme by most people's standards. That's the church there on the left. And then on the right is this like sort of freewheeling, sort of everybody welcome, sort of Christian-ish church kind of place that has lesbian mixers on Wednesday. So I always wonder how the two of these churches sort of get along, or if they even acknowledge one another. Anyway, another basketball hoop. You love the basketball. So we are just about to reach Louisiana Street up here. A lot of the streets here in Lawrence are named after states in the United States of America. And the curious thing, which I'm guessing probably 95% of the people in Lawrence don't realize, is that there's a significant stretch of sort of the main downtown area off to the west where the streets are basically in the order in which the states entered the Union. So if you go back and look, for example, you can look up like the Missouri Compromise, when Missouri and Maine both came into the Union as states. They were in that order, and so you can travel from downtown Lawrence out to the west for a good few miles at least, and you can learn some history because the states are in the order they came into the Union. So Louisiana Street is obviously pretty close to downtown because it was one of the first states to enter after the original 13. So we're moving north on the sidewalk there. I am assuming that I'm breaking this video up into a couple of pieces, otherwise it would be quite long. It is also getting quite chilly, and the wind is now in my face, which is not particularly pleasant. Although with my recent injuries, cold actually feels kind of good. But also a big park across the street here, and middle school up here that we will pass shortly. A fairly busy stretch. As you can see, it is not at all sunny at all today. It looks exactly like it did yesterday, although yesterday it was drizzling all day. But anyway, there you go. We can get back to Vegas here in just a second. Yep, there you go, Biden-Harris. I think they won. I think you can take down the sign. I think it has served its purpose. Lawrence, for reference, a college town, pretty much just the opposite of the rest of Kansas. It is a very liberal, very heavily Democratic leaning community. So we typically, our voting patterns typically are very different from those in most of Kansas. Another look at the Billy Mills Middle School. Billy Mills was I believe, was a student at the University of Kansas, also a Native American, and an Olympian. And, so they renamed this school a few years ago in his honor. Lawrence actually has a pretty large Native American population. In addition to the University of Kansas, let me switch hands here with my camera / phone. They also have what is called the Haskell University now. Used to just be a 2-year school, but it is one of a number of schools set up way back in the day to help educate Native Americans. So, and that's off to the east here. We will not walk that far by any means because it's way too cold. So, but anyway, getting back to Las Vegas, I was talking about my second trip to Vegas, which was my first solo trip, staying at the Plaza and traveling up and down the Strip. Back in those days, I was the original Pennies for Vegas, before there was a Pennies for Vegas, because it just didn't have a lot of money to gamble or anything else. I was playing nickel game. What are those called? Game machine. I found like nickel blackjack on these things. They'd get you a free drink from time to time. There were so many deals, meal deals, that you could take advantage of, particularly downtown. The plaza, the plaza had like an overnight special, 99-cent bacon and eggs. They were fine. I mean, it wasn't like crappy. They were perfectly good bacon and eggs. Not sure I could have made them at home for 99 cents. So I had that a couple of times. Of course, if you added a coffee, that was like another $1. So the coffee costs as much as the bacon and eggs, but still you're out of there for just a little over $2. Leave a tip, of course. I think it was this, I'm sure it was this trip that I took advantage of the Binion's steak special, which also ran overnight. I wasn't super impressed with it. I think it was only like $2.99, but you know, half of the potatoes I got were basically raw. The steak was okay, and it was a long wait, but yeah, those were the days of the great deals in Las Vegas. Switching hands again. It's really chilly out here, but yeah, like I said, I ended up walking all the way down to the Strip a few times, taking the bus back. There's nothing like taking the Deuce back downtown at like 2 in the morning. You get some interesting people. I did a kind of diary of this trip, and someday I'll find it. Maybe we'll revisit that as well. But it was a good time, and the other thing that sort of kept me alive on this trip, and probably the next couple of trips, was the Sahara Buffet, which was notoriously not very good. But at lunch it was like $3.99, and there was, you know, all the pizza you could eat, which was, you know, at least frozen pizza quality, and the fried chicken and the mashed potatoes and gravy were pretty decent. So, you know, I had no problem living on that. And then, like I said, I would come back at night and have a late night special of some sort. Of course, there was also the shrimp cocktails, the Golden Gate, and so forth. So there was plenty of cheap food back then. Not nearly as like it is right now. So, a bunch of cul-de-sacs in this neighborhood. Again, I suspect these were considered to be really sort of cool places to live a few decades back. A lot of road work, a lot of sidewalk work this past year or so here in the neighborhood. I'm sure it gets boring just looking at me walking down the same sidewalk, but hey, you could be looking at me, which would be even worse. It is really chilly. It is in the mid-20s. Thankfully, it is not snowing or there's not any wind at the moment. Though there's supposed to be some tonight. All right. So anyway, that was my trip in 1997. In 98, I went back in February. Again, thanks to an LA Times offer. I stayed at the Sahara, and this would begin a series of trips where I stayed on the north end of the Strip. I have to say, I mean, I thought the rooms were okay at the time. Certainly a little small, a little run down, but not bad. But I never liked playing at the Sahara. So in addition to sort of walking down to the middle part of the Strip, I played a lot more at some of the neighboring properties like Stardust and Stratosphere and Westward Ho, places like that. I do remember it being cold because it was in February. It was also right before, I believe, the very first NASCAR race, because I was getting ready to leave, because I always went Sunday through Thursday night and then flew back on Friday because it's much cheaper to stay in the hotels that way. But so yeah, it was the first NASCAR race, I believe, was that year, which would have been 98. And that probably would have been it. Except for a number of offers that I got that spring from some of the places that I played. And I hadn't played that much, really. But I guess they were curious to see if I'd play more. And I ended up getting an offer for 2 free nights at the Stardust. Now, if anyone's been around long enough to remember when the Stardust still had the little motel rooms out back, they would pretty much give those away to anybody. Hand change again. Chilly. Should put my gloves on. This is actually the entrance to where I live, but I'm going to go to the store and show you where I nearly killed myself. And so I got one of those. Anyway, someone tried to run over me, but not trying very hard, or they would have succeeded. And then I got an offer from the Stratosphere for 2 free nights. And I'm starting to think, well, maybe I should go back this summer. Be kind of crazy, but I'm sure not unheard of. To go 2 times in 1 year? What a deal. Police officers in Lawrence, they're all in their little SUVs. I'm hoping these sidewalks aren't slippery, because otherwise I'll be taking you with me on my next fall. And then I had mailings from the Riviera. I had played a lot at the Riviera on the previous trip because I had sort of fallen in love with one of the cocktail waitresses. Can't remember what her name was. Nancy or something like that. So basically I had enough sort of points that I had earned that I had 2 free nights at the Riviera. So I was like, you know what? I'm going back to Vegas. I'm going to stay on the Strip. I'm going to stay a whole week. It is literally the only time I've stayed 7 days. July is hot. So remember that. If you want to go to Vegas in July, it's pretty damn hot. The other thing to remember is don't lose like half of your gambling budget the first night. It's not a desirable thing to do. But in any case, I still had the Sahara Buffet to keep me filled with food. And I went all over there. It seemed like that was like the peak of the sort of free shuttle period, where there was like free shuttles everywhere. So I went all over the place. Went out to like Boulder Station. Oh, and then from Boulder Station, I made the mistake of thinking, I can walk to Sam's Town. Yeah, theoretically, you can. I wouldn't recommend it. So, again, definitely low rolling and hardcore. All right, so we're at the grocery store because I need to get a couple of things. And this little series of rocks right here that you see, this is where I lost my footing about a week ago and made a mess out of my face. So anyway, hope that you enjoyed this little walkabout with me today. I don't know, it's only 28 minutes long, so maybe we'll just put the whole thing up today and let you watch it in toto. Of course, we'll be back on Saturday with another episode of Vegas Weekly. Till then, hope you have a great, lucky, healthy, and safe week. Safe shopping. We'll see you soon.